game. South Sydney going down to Penrith 20, sent to the second at the end, and with me as always, Jimmy Smith. How are you, Jimmy?
I'm really well, Steve. I don't know whether you've got a tough internet connection there or not, but the sounds, the pictures are coming through, but the sound is a little bit wobbly on that one. 18 points to 12, the final score in that Panthers versus Souths game. A little bit scrappy at times. The fact that it was at Cogra was significant as well, and not being played out of Campbelltown Stadium, which was reasons for that were worrying over the surface. It has had a lot of traffic, of course, but lots to talk about this afternoon / this evening, Stephen. Yeah,
there is news breaking just in the last few hours that the Australian Rugby League Commission are in talks with the New Zealand Rugby Union for that old chestnut, the cross-code chestnut, Kangaroos, the All Blacks, and it would happen first weekend in December if it happens. Of course, all the old arguments come up. Sean Johnson saying All Blacks would flog the Australian Rugby League team, and then people making fun of Sean Johnson. So, there's before we continue with that, just a word on Simon Cooper, who started rugby league in Germany, a friend of mine who sadly passed away overnight after a long and brave battle with cancer. To me, those are my heroes, the people who go into areas where no one knows what rugby league is. There's no glamour involved, and they just spend their lives pretty much trying to make everyone else see what they can see. So, Simon, you'll be deeply missed. It's an interesting one, Jimmy. An interesting one, Jimmy. What are your thoughts on this possible fixture?
Well, the biggest issue is the rules that they play under. Okay, if we go back to 1996 when Wigan played Bath, I think they played two separate games, so that it was rugby league one week, and then which Wigan won very comfortably. I think they scored 100, and then Bath won the rugby union game, not as convincingly the next week. But things like lineouts, things like contested scrums, and all that. How many phases of play are the All Blacks allowed? How many numbers of players on the field? Okay, what's the positions of the players who aren't on the field? And there's lots to go through. But in saying that, there's also lots of reasons why it can go ahead. And I think, the two outstanding sides of rugby at an international level are the Kangaroos and the All Blacks. It literally is a promoter's dream. Where it happens, when it happens, remains to be seen. But December 5 works on the schedule of both teams. And the other thing about it is what COVID-19 has thrown up in 2020 is, why not try something out of the ordinary? The All Blacks have lost a lot of revenues based around games they would have been playing at this time. The Kangaroos have lost the Ashes, the Ashes tour that they were going to go on to England. So from that point of view, if you're ever going to do it, this is the year to do it.
You say that, but actually, now it's just as kind of a promoter's dream and a bit of a kind of a circus type thing. It probably would have been better off happening, before 2005 when Australia lost the Tri-Nations when they hadn't been beaten for 27 years. Whereas now Australia's last start was a defeat to a Tier 2 nation. So from the point of view of timing, the point of view of the timing from a promoter's point of view, it's not ideal. It's only ideal commercially because of COVID-19. And if you remember a few years ago, the RFL had a discussion about England Rugby League playing the Wallabies in rugby union because they both needed the money. And that was something that was discussed, maybe I think four years ago. I am neither enthusiastic or I'm not enthusiastic either way. I'm not super excited by the possibility of it, and I'm not super against it either. The one thing about rules is that, as we know, there is a hybrid rule book, which is Phil Franks, involved for many years at the Manly Club, was involved in drawing up, where when you cross halfway, the rules change when you go back. So I don't have that rule book in my head, but I know that the halfway line is involved. So, I think it's interesting. I wonder, and one of the people, we had a guest who wasn't able to come on, unfortunately, And one of the people I thought about getting on was the rugby league and rugby union historian Tony Collins, because there have been times in the history of the codes where these sort of matches have actually been markers, they've been milestones, and they've had an enormous impact on the directions of the games afterwards. And then there've been other instances where these games have meant nothing. They've just been to make a bit of money, for a bit of a laugh. And I just wonder, I really wanted to hear what Tony Collins' thoughts would be on which category this game would fall into, given the Australian Rugby Union are in financial difficulties. I just wonder whether it could lead to some sort of, change in relation between the codes.
Well, it comes on the back of, was it Malcolm Knox who wrote in the Sydney Morning Herald about a month ago about, the time for the two codes to come together? It certainly makes sense from an Australian perspective, but from an international perspective, it makes no sense because there is no basically other rugby code to join with rugby union that exists in far more countries at a significant level than rugby league. And the thing about all those questions that this game is not going to answer, because no one will be satisfied with the outcome. If the All Blacks lose, then they'll say yes, but the rules favoured the league team. And if the league team lose, they'll say yes, but the rules favoured the rugby union team. So I don't think it's going to answer any questions from that perspective. It's just entertainment. So take it as that. It's just entertainment. And to think about, you talked about, well, maybe England Rugby League, we're going to play the Wallabies. Expect that to be announced very shortly after, if this is to be successful in getting off the ground.
That's the thing, and probably the aspect that people don't understand is the myriad contracts that why is there still two codes when they're both professional? The main reason is money and contractual commitments. The ARLC has has a contract to provide certain services to sponsors and broadcasters. Rugby Australia, maybe not as many contracts anymore as they'd like, but they have the same. And the International Rugby League Federation has its contracts, and then World Rugby have theirs, and that's the reason there are two codes, because professionalism is the reason for the break, and professionalism is not an issue anymore. So to bring these, to bring one team from each side together, it's like Marvel and DC. It's like we're doing a heroes movie with Marvel and DC characters all in it together. It's just legal boundaries are broken down. Then the boundaries is really the reason there are still two codes.
Yeah, and you look at the situation with that Jordan Rapiner faced earlier this year. He went over there to play rugby union for Panasonic Wild Knights, couldn't get a game because there was only a certain number of imports that were allowed to play, and he wasn't making that side. And then the season was abandoned because of COVID-19. And then he comes back to Canberra having been fully paid his money by they got paid out completely, their contract, by Panasonic Wild Knights. So he went to the Canberra Raiders and said, I'll play for whatever you got. And whatever they got wasn't much, but didn't matter. He was still in front, and the Raiders were in front. The only one to suffer were the Panasonic Wild Knights, who weren't able to get their competition away. I think if we get confirmation of this game, and by the way, the articles that I've read on this haven't mentioned who is the promoter, so I don't know whether Phil Franks is behind that, but that would be interesting to determine. Then I think there'd be a lot of other games that you could fall in line with that, whether it be on the same weekend, at the same venue, in a similar vein. Then I think it'd just be a free-for-all.
Yeah, Jimmy, but that's my point exactly. If you get to the point where you keep the telecasters on both sides, the Kangaroos contract holders and the All Blacks contract holders, if you keep them all happy, right? And then it's like the end of the Super League war in 1998. If you get Optus and Telstra to split the telecasting of the games, and you get out of necessary sponsorship contracts, then the damn wall comes down. And when I say damn wall, I'm not cursing, but the damn wall comes down, and suddenly the only reason there are two codes is because they have different administrations now. That's it, right? Because sevens and 15s by an accident of history happens to be run by one body, and 13s and 9s by an accident of history lost in the industrial north of England in the 19th century happens to be run by a different side. And the thing that keeps them separate is their respective contractual obligations. Now, if you find a way around those contractual then there's nothing to keep them separate anymore. So
as we say, now is the time. Now is the time.
But I'm not sure it's a good. We discussed this on the show before. I'm not sure. It's a great thing if there's suddenly one code of rugby run by one administration. I'm not sure I'd be a fan of it or I'd watch it. But nevertheless, some other news breaking here, Jimmy. So the League One and Championship clubs are currently meeting to discuss the possibility of returning. A lot of people think they just won't return because of the cost of doing so with no fans, etc. Tomorrow, it was foreshadowed that there might be an announcement today that Super League would be back, and we heard the date last week with Gareth Carvell of August 16th. That meeting, which could lead to that announcement, is tomorrow. So we could have confirmation that Super League is back tomorrow.
So we heard it here first a week ago.
Well, you didn't really hear it here first. It was the first person you could put a name to the date. The date had been floating around for a while, but it was all in these unsourced stories. So it had the date was floating around, but no one is really that happy to put their name to anything in the current environment here. So
what was your take on League One and Championship coming back? Given the fact that, and explain this to the people who are listening, perhaps outside of and watching outside of the UK, and that is the reliance on crowds for revenue, as opposed to in Australia where there's the reliance on the broadcast revenue as the majority of income.
Well, the bottom line is really that Sky have the rights to Championship and League One, but don't show it. They show the Summer Bash, they'll show some playoffs, and that's it. So basically, the Super League clubs earn the money that dribbles down to League One and Championship. There's a furloughing scheme here where the government's paying 80% of people's wages. So it's actually Super League who had to go in, take a hit for the team. Super League had to go back and play so that the lower divisions get their money. They actually don't generate enough money themselves pretty much to stay afloat. I mean, League One, they don't get a lot of money from central funding, so they do pretty well themselves. But having games with no spectators and then having the players back at work a minute before they have to be, because those clubs financially, it's in their interest to keep the players out and getting paid by the government as long as possible. It just doesn't make sense. So my understanding is there's a small group of clubs who really want to play. Lee, for instance, whose owner, Derek Beaumont, wants to go back up to Super League. He wants to get back on the pitch as soon as possible. But then again, we will find out tomorrow if there is any promotion or relegation. So
right.
If there's no relegation in Super League this year, Jimmy, then there's that incentive for the top championship clubs to go back to playing disappears.
I would be surprised if they would say that relegation and promotion exists during the course of this year, notwithstanding the impact that would have on those top championship clubs that are obviously that's their greatest aim throughout the course of the year. So players coming back a minute before they're due to play is massive risk of injury too.
No, it's more. No, you misunderstood my point. Players coming back a minute before that will make the club take over their payments. So, in other words, the players in the lower
what
divisions,
if they're training? Aren't they? If they're back training?
No. The government tells them when they can go back to training, and the clubs won't do it and even push it until the government says they do. So there's stage return and there's return to training, and I believe socially distant training is already back, or it's on the verge of coming back, and then there's a return to playing. Okay, and the same goes for every business. You can keep getting the benefit of the furlough for the same period as any other business. So what I'm saying is the clubs in the lower divisions want the government to keep paying the players' wages as long as possible. And that is more important to most of them than returning to the pitch.
I saw a lovely photo of Brighton Beach, which looks lovely, but dear me, there was thousands and thousands of people on it, but which is obviously cause for concern.
Yeah, they were out, mate. You know what they were doing? They were out there surfing the second wave, unfortunately. That's what's going to happen.
Yes, very good. Very good. That's not bad from you. It's not good, but it's not bad from you.
It's not funny. It's not funny, but I think it rings true.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, quickly, Panthers v Souths. didn't quite get going, did they? The South Sydney Rabbitohs. The Panthers were good. Cleary was excellent. Really controlled.
Despite the goal kicking.
I was going to say, excluding his goal kicking. Late try to Alex Johnson. He seems to be scoring tries. Back to that try scoring at will of late. But he was a late try scorer for them. They just didn't quite seem into the game, the South Sydney Rabbitohs, at different stages. I thought Penrith controlled it really well.
It was. I enjoyed watching because I thought it had the right balance between sort of set plays and structure and spontaneous play. And I think some of the games, since the resumption, have been all of one and not enough of the other. And I thought from a spectacle point of view, it was quite entertaining. But Souths just seem a little bit off the pace. Penrith, I believe, moving into the competition lead with that victory, they look really, really strong. It's funny how you just find that combination, and I don't think even coaches and recruitment managers think they know the recipe, but really, do they? You know what I mean? Sometimes it just happens, and Penrith just seem to have it at the moment.
As individuals, the way they play the game, Cleary and Luai are really well suited because it's almost exactly how you described it. It's no surprise that in a Penrith game, there was a little bit of structure and a little bit of play what you see, because Cleary is structure, Luai is play what you see. Yeah, so that I think they're a really nice balance. They've played a lot of footy together coming through the grades, both outstanding juniors. So, they look good.
And Dally M points, 3 Dally M points from me for Craig Catterick, the Penrith trainer. He was on screen more than anyone else during the course of the night. So I don't know if he gets a win bonus. He deserves one, but 3 Dally M points from me.
Okay, 18 points to 12, the Panthers over the Rabbitohs, and they go to top of the league, as you mentioned. Stephen Kearney was sacked last Saturday. We called the game on NRL Nation on Friday. That was the Rabbitohs versus Warriors game, and at the time we made mention of it, but didn't consider it perhaps how important it was, and that was that Tony Iro was delivering the halftime speech and Stephen Kearney was standing behind him. Within 24 hours, Stephen Kearney had been told by management, Cameron George, the CEO, that he was to be relieved of his position, and had told the players. And from what I understand, a really emotional farewell, which is understandable because, as you would know, Steve, Stephen Kearney is one of the great gentlemen of the game.
Yeah, he is, and he's been around with the Kiwis for a long time, and people were very much focused on, the fact that the Warriors were in an adversarial situation. They were away from their families. People expect they were everyone's second favourite team. People expect them to struggle anyway, and so the idea that Stephen Kearney would be sacked at the height of a crisis appalled a lot of people. I did see a story by Tony Adams suggesting that. It was Isaac Moses' suspension that actually prompted it, because Isaac, allegedly, according to the Mole, Isaac Moses had said, well, if you get rid of Stephen Kearney, then I'm pulling players out of there and blah, 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 blah. So according to that report, the opportunity to sack Stephen Kearney arose with Isaac Moses having his agent license rescinded. So, it is unfortunate.
He'll have a right of appeal on that one, and if he wins the appeal, I'm presuming he's pulling those players out.
Yeah, it'll be pretty obvious, won't it?
Yeah. From what I understand, Stephen Kearney will turn up at the Brisbane Broncos under the with Anthony Seibold, who is managed by
Isaac Moses.
Well done, Stephen. Joining the dots on that one.
Hull as well. Hull have been mentioned as well. So
Okay. There's one way to look at it, and I initially took that view. Like what a really tough decision at an impossible time for that team, given what they've been through. And then the other way to look at it is, you think if they need to make a change, if they realise that Stephen Kearney is not the coach for them, why wait until the end of this year, or to a point when the teams are back with their families? Or I thought, okay, if you think of it remember, this is not the management team that signed Stephen Kearney. This is not the ownership group. So from that point of view, you think, oh, okay, that's interesting. Wayne Bennett's been linked with the job. He's been linked with the Dragons job. He's been linked with the Bulldogs job. Wouldn't surprise me if he turned up at North Queensland. So he's busy, Wayne. What's incredible to think is that a man who is 70 years of age is still in such high demand when this is new territory for someone of his age to be coaching an NRL team.
Yeah, but I think it speaks a little bit to the world we live in now, where everyone is risk averse, and basically those premierships, they give the people who employ him an out, justification. It's not their fault. Look at his record. You know, we live in a world where people are, you know, as I said, very risk averse, and it's all about box ticking and criteria and optics and all that sort of thing. And that has more currency than it has in the entire history of rugby league in Australia now in the corporate world. So a guy who is still active, who isn't completely a car crash, and who has an impressive CV, is going to get more opportunities now than 10, 20, 30 years ago, because as I said, all those reasons, the whole LinkedIn world where, you know, it's all about, you know, I've done this and I've done that, and this guy's got great credentials. You know, that is more important than it's ever been.
So Phil Economides would not get a start in 2020 in the National Rugby League. Is that what you're saying?
I have it on good authority from Phil that if he does, I get a percentage. So,
well, then I'm rooting for him. Jeff Tuvey has been linked as well. I thought that was interesting. I don't know who did the linking, whether it's the Warriors or Jeff, but his name's been thrown up. There seems to be a lot of coaches. If we go through it, Dean Pay, my information is that John Bateman has said to the Bulldogs, yeah, I'll come to you if you employ Sean Wayne as your coach. So, you know, that those drums are beating around Dean Pay. Obviously, Paul McGregor.
And that is the opposite. That's the opposite. Sean Wayne's appointment would be a risk, particularly given the view of Super League in Australia, where a lot of people just don't rate it. And so Sean Wayne would be, it'll be a brave board, a brave chief executive, someone who's willing to put their job on the line for the success of a club who'd appoint Sean Wayne. And
what was Adam O'Brien then?
Yeah, he was definitely the same. Yeah, I think, but again, you know, the whole being in, I would say that having been an assistant coach to Craig Bellamy would rank higher with your average NRL board member than having coached Wigan to multiple titles.
Yeah, which is strange, right? The incredible thing about Adam O'Brien, he had 11 years in this system, 10 at Melbourne and 1 at the Roosters in a system, and was never the head coach once of any team.
Yeah.
Of any team.
Wow.
So you know, we know that the assistant coach role is very different to the head coach role. Very, very different at NRL level, but even at a Canterbury Cup level or a under 20s level, he was never that person. So the Newcastle Knights took a risk. That they were risk happy.
Going to work in Melbourne under Craig Bellamy is like doing one of these diplomas. It costs a fortune, but you're guaranteed a job when you graduate. It's like you could almost pay the Storm for the year or two you're there. But you could pay them because it's like you're guaranteed a job when you get out.
Stephen Kearney, Kevin Walters, Anthony Seibold, Michael Maguire, Dean Pay.
Jason Riles coming up.
Jason Riles will probably be the next cab off the rank, and you're quite right about that. They talk about family trees, right? The coaches' family trees, and if you look at Warren Ryan's, it's incredible. Back in those days, you didn't have assistant coaches, but you had players that you influenced. So he had a number of players that went on to be coaches. They talk about. There's a book from the US. I'm trying to think. Sidney Finkelstein wrote it, and it talks about super bosses in different industries, and the super boss can be highly demanding and really push their employees, but they're also very encouraging of them and they realise they can't hold them back, so encourage them to continue to go. He identifies 10 or 12 across all industries I think Larry Ellison, the founder of Oracle, I think he's like 6th richest man in the world. Of the 11 people who were his vice presidents in his company, 9 of them went on to be CEOs in their own right of big tech companies. Bill Walsh, the former coach of the San Francisco 49ers, in 2016, there were 20 of the 32 coaches in the NFL who had been in Bill Walsh's family coaching tree. Mm. Just incredible how these people can have an impact on it. Craig Bellamy.
But sometimes it's also, I'm sure it has a huge bearing on ability, but it also has as big a bearing on perception. So, you're going to get a chance if you're perceived along the lines that you just outlined. If people are talking about you the way you just talked about those 20 coaches, then you're going to at least get an opportunity.
Perception is reality, Stephen. You know that. You know that.
I still believe in an objective truth. I still believe that just because you don't test for a disease doesn't mean you don't have it.
What if you test for a disease and it says you do have it, but you don't, which was the case of Conor McKenna in the AFL. They're thinking, oh, he shrugged it off in 2 days. It's cost Essendon a game.
Well, Richard Wilkins has had it about 3 times, hasn't he? And hasn't had a single symptom yet.
That's right. Yeah. You know what? Tricky dickies like that. Unstoppable. Speaking of Melbourne, the second wave that's coming, or not coming, is in. Victoria at the moment has meant that the Melbourne Storm relocate. They'll play tomorrow and they'll play against the Warriors. And then they're staying at Olympic Park in Sydney. Then the preferred option is Sunshine Coast and play games out of Brisbane because they've got access to facilities. They're really a 4th Queensland team anyway. And I think a lot of the players would say, well, if we're going to be away from our families, let's do it in an environment that we're familiar with. And of course, they've got their junior club or their feeder club, Sunshine Coast Falcons, up there as well. So that seems to work for me.
Yeah, probably most of the players' parents are up there as well, and grandparents. Yes. If you're going to be away from your immediate family, let's be closer to my extended family. So, it's really interesting. And the crowds, I guess we're edging closer, aren't we? Am I right in saying the cardboard cutouts are gone? They weren't there today, so they're on the way out. The cardboard cutouts.
No, the cardboard cutouts are the cardboard cutouts are the Penrith Panthers. Because of the design of the seats at Jubilee Stadium or Netstrata Stadium compared to Campbelltown Stadium, didn't fit in the seats, so they couldn't bring them out. So that was the reason. So and a lot of their signage that the Panthers had been using at their games at Campbelltown didn't work at Netstrata either. So that was the position around that. As of July, so next round 8, clubs will allow fans back into the stand. They're going to allow 25% capacity up to 10,000 people. So if the Broncos play a game at Suncorp, 25% capacity is about 12,500, but they'll be allowed 10,000. And games being played out of Bankwest Stadium, 25% capacity is about 7,500. So that's what teams will be allowed to play out of there. I think that there was talk around the Netstrata and Leichhardt Oval because of the hill areas there and with the reduced seating that there'd be a much lower crowd. So I think a lot of teams are going to be playing out of Bankwest Stadium, which might suffer the same issue that Campbelltown Stadium has suffered with all the injury or perceived injuries coming from that surface. Any other news from the north, Stephen?
Well, we should mention that James Graham is coming back. That's it, enormous news. When we do get this announcement tomorrow, hopefully with Super League returns in mid-August, we're going to be treated to James Graham's cameo at his former club, St Helens. It's very romantic for the rest of the season. And then I understand James Graham. Well, the reports are. I don't understand. I understand it from reading it, just like everyone else. That he's going to go back to Australia and embark on a media career. So, as I said on the last week's program, if you're going to lose the best forward in the UK mid-season, then replacing him with a club legend, that's probably about the only thing you can do, and that's what St Helens have done.
Just seeing now too, a bit of late news coming through that James Tedesco has been ruled out of that Roosters match following that heavy knock to make a Sivo. So that is big news. Because he has been so very good for them. Doesn't mean they can't rack up a big score against the Dragons, because as we know, James Tedesco missed the 59-0 victory over the Broncos in Melbourne. I'll quickly get your tips before we say goodbye, mate. The Storm up against the Warriors. That's first game tomorrow.
Storm.
Yeah, I believe that is the case. Roosters, Dragons.
I want to tip an upset. But I won't. No, the Roosters.
If you're tipping an upset, don't do it in that game. Cowboys, Knights.
Knights.
Yeah, I think you're right. I'm going with you. We're all the same at the moment. Broncos, Titans. Now, this is interesting.
Titans.
Ooh, there's your upset. I'm going to tip the Broncos in that one, surely. Eels up against the Raiders. Eels, no Nathan Brown. Raiders were poor again last week, and the Eels have coming off the emotional high of playing in a high-quality game against the Roosters.
Para.
Yeah, I'm going Para as well. Sea Eagles, no Tommy T, no Dylan Walker against the Sharks.
Oh. Sharks.
Sea Eagles. Bulldogs, West Tigers.
Oh, West Tigers.
Yeah, go the West Tigers. Go the West Tigers in that one. Mate, I think that's it. How's things over there for you? I mentioned
it's stinking hot, mate. It is absolutely stinking hot. Like I'm going to have to, maybe open the door of the apartment, let a bit of fresh air, and it's like 30, it must be 30 degrees. I actually haven't been outside yet, but it is. It's really warm, and everyone here wants to make the most of it. So they just drop everything and lay in the gardens and stuff like that because they don't get a lot of days like this each year. I've got a book to finish, so I'm just inside doing my book. But looking forward to the Super League being back and us trying to get our streaming platform up and running and customer friendly and get people to come in. rugbyleaguehub.com/register. Sign up for information about the games we'll be showing and when we'll be showing them and how you can access them and all that sort of stuff. So today's program went out on a couple more platforms. I believe it's live on Daily Motion as well, which is I always thought it was a very strange name for the
Daily
French
Motion.
YouTube.
What is that?
It's called Daily Motion. Well, to most people, it's something they do in the morning when they get out of bed, but in French, it must mean something different. So
okay.
It's a French answer to YouTube. So yeah. Anyway, and along with Twitch and a bunch of different pages on Facebook, with obviously the main flagship. That's the word I was looking for. The flagship is obviously the Rugby League Hub Facebook. So we want to get as many people aware of games and of rugby league as possible, and spread the news about our service and a history-making service for the resumed Super League of showing games that have never been available on TV before. So that's what we're all about.
By the way, when it comes to streaming, Steve, we don't try to do it. We do it. And then people join it. Good on you, mate. Stay safe. We'll speak again next week.
See you next week. Bye.